Hi, my name is Nadeem. I'm a psychotherapist and social worker based in Ontario, Canada. Welcome to MindFlexTherapy. I would say the bottom line as to why I decided I wanted to become a therapist is because there's always been, ever since I was a young child, a desire for wanting to make people's lives a bit easier. So when I see someone after coming to talk to me, I can see them breathe a little bit easier, leave the room feeling a bit lighter. That feeling always stuck with me. So how do we treat anxiety? So first we have to understand what exactly is anxiety. The cognitive model of anxiety is those three thinking traps that our mind falls into that kind of give us this formula for anxiety, the ingredients to anxiety. So it's the thinking trap of catastrophic thinking, the probability thinking trap, so the likelihood that that catastrophe that your mind is conceptualizing is going to come true is high. And then the third is a resource thinking trap. So it's an underestimation of our internal and external resources to cope with this perceived threat that our mind is kind of coming up with. So do I have the people in my life that can help support me to go through this potential catastrophic situation? Do I have the internal coping strategies to deal with this potential catastrophic situation coming true? So those are the three kind of thinking traps that our mind falls into that leads to this feeling of anxiety. But this feeling of anxiety is actually just a mix of physical sensations that you have. So the physical sensations can look like feeling butterflies in your stomach, feeling an increased heart rate, shortness of breath, feeling increase in temperature, dizziness, lightheadedness. These sensations in themselves aren't dangerous, and the way that we attribute these sensations to anxiety is also the thought that comes along with these sensations. So if my mind is thinking about some impending, threatening situation that's going to occur tomorrow, and now my body is responding with these sensations that are kind of getting me to brace myself for an impending danger, that's how I know, that's how I conceptualize that I'm facing, that I'm feeling anxiety, okay? An intense version of anxiety would be called panic, because now my body's going into this fight, flight, and freeze mode because there's a threat that is there right in front of me that is, a danger to my well-being. That threat, though, with panic is your own internal sensations being dangerous. You might have the idea in your mind that you're going to have a heart attack and die, or that you're going to have some other medical condition that's coming about because of these internal sensations that you're experiencing. So in addition to the three thinking traps that our mind falls into that contributes to this feeling of anxiety, you can also see the cycle of anxiety. So it starts off with this perceived threat that our mind comes up with. So let's say the perceived threat is that there's a German Shepherd standing in front of you and you're on the street. Okay. Now, the thought afterwards is that this dog can attack me. And then after that, you might have this reaction to avoid, to run away, the flight reaction. And after the flight reaction, if you get to safety and you successfully escape the German Shepherd, then you feel a sense of relief. And then after that, that maintains and reinforces this fear that you have of German Shepherds. That now your mind has learned and your body has learned that I have to escape this threat that a German Shepherd poses every time I see a German Shepherd. So that's the cycle of anxiety. Now, if your previous experiences are pleasant with dogs, especially with German Shepherds, you might have a completely different reaction to seeing a German Shepherd. So our anxiety is also informed by our previous experiences, whether those experiences are pleasant or unpleasant. It teaches your mind that the thing that you're afraid of, the external or even internal stimulus, so the thing that pops up that makes you scared, it reinforces the idea that that thing is scary and dangerous and you should be afraid of it. Because when you successfully escape the thing that is dangerous, you were safe and you felt a sense of relief. What we might do in therapy, we would figure out why it's important for them to overcome this fear. And then we would figure out an exposure-based intervention. We would set a clear goal with the client. So if the client has the clear goal that they want to be able to be in the same room as a dog and even pet the dog, the family dog that they have, then that's the top of their exposure hierarchy. So we'd make a graded list of exposure tasks that we can do to reach the pinnacle of their exposure hierarchy, to be able to be in the same room as a dog and pet the dog. So maybe at the bottom of their exposure hierarchy would be to just look at images of dogs and to get used to seeing dogs, seeing the texture of their fur, seeing their teeth. And then on the next step of their hierarchy, we might actually go within 100 meters of a dog. So they might make a plan with one of their family members to bring a dog to the park, and they would stand 100 meters away from the dog. So they're kind of close. And then next on the exposure task would be to be maybe 50 meters away from the dog. So they're a bit closer. And now they're teaching their mind and their body that I can actually be around this dog and not get attacked. The dog is not as dangerous as I thought it's going to be. The dog is not as much of a threat as my mind anticipates it is. Interoceptive exposure is one of the main treatments for panic attacks. So when we talked about the cycle of anxiety, we have the perceived threat that pops up in the person's mind. The perceived threat in the previous scenario that we talked about was seeing a dog and being afraid of the dog and wanting to avoid and run away from it. With panic attacks, the perceived threat is actually your own internal sensations. So whether that's a beating heart, your heart's beating too fast or faster than you think is appropriate, having a higher temperature, feeling a bit trembly. So these uncomfortable internal sensations are not actually dangerous, but that's the perceived threat that we have in our mind, our own internal sensations as they arise. And what happens is we try to get rid of these sensations. So we try to escape them, we might distract ourselves, we might eat some food that helps us to feel better, we might watch a video that helps calm us down, we might go and talk to a family member that helps calm us down, because we don't feel like we can handle those sensations as they arise, because they're threatening to us. So that avoidance cycle is then reinforced because you feel a sense of relief that, oh, these sensations went away when I distracted myself. And then that reinforces this fear that when these sensations come up again, I have to escape them. These are dangerous. So with interoceptive exposure, we're disrupting that avoidance cycle that happens from perceived threat of my own internal sensations to avoidance and escape. So we would actually expose ourselves to feeling those sensations. So if a client is afraid of hyperventilating or breathing really quickly, what we might do with a client, and we might set an appropriate time for them that they think is just right, that's not too overwhelming, but it's also not too underwhelming. So we might have 60 seconds where the client is hyperventilating, so they're breathing quite fast, and the safety of the therapy room. And by the end of that exposure, it's intended to teach the client to show their own mind and their body that they can handle feeling these sensations without it overwhelming them, that the sensations aren't dangerous. And from there, the mind and body learns that I don't need to escape these sensations anymore. So it might seem unfamiliar to people what interoceptive exposure is, but one popular thing that I've seen online is the Wim Hof method. So the Wim Hof method, he has people kind of breathe rapidly and then breathe slowly and then hold their breath. So that's actually a form of interoceptive exposure. It gets people feeling these uncomfortable sensations in their body that are typically associated with anxiety and panic, and it's getting them used to it. And he's kind of guiding you through it, and people feel a sense of relief afterwards. And that's exactly because it disrupts that cycle of anxiety, the avoidance. So forcefully trying to get rid of negative thoughts and trying to replace them with positive thoughts is causing people suffering, because it's promoting this tendency to want to fight with your own mind, to struggle with your own mind. And what I teach clients is to just drop the struggle with your own mind. Your mind is better than you at rationalizing and making sense of things that don't even make sense. What we would do in therapy is to drop the struggle with your mind. Allow it to do what it needs to do. Our mind is this threat detecting machine, problem solving machine that comes up with a bunch of automatic thoughts, some pleasant, some unpleasant, some we like, some we don't like. And we can decide how we respond when those thoughts pop up. Do we fight them when they pop up? Do we try to get rid of them? Or do we respond to them in a different way, in a more helpful way? Can we step back and just allow ourselves to observe those thoughts pop up without necessarily grappling with them or trying to run away from them? Just like a stream that has sticks flowing through it, leaves, rocks, debris, do we try to pick up all of those objects and get rid of them? Or can we just allow some of them to be and maybe take out the ones that we find useful and allow that to guide our actions? It's the same with the automatic thoughts that pop into our minds. Can we take the useful thoughts that pop into our minds and use them to enhance the functioning of our lives? If my mind might come up with the automatic thought that, I'm socially awkward and people are going to judge me for that. If it comes up with that worry, what I can do is I can take a step back and say, okay, I notice that my mind is saying that I'm socially awkward and people are going to judge me. It's just trying to protect me from a future threat in a social situation of being judged. Thanks, mind, for doing your job. I don't need to engage with it and try to convince my mind that, it's not true. There's been times that I've been socially confident, because what that does is it gets you over-involved and entangled in your mind. It doesn't allow you to step back and see your mind for what it is. So what happens when you try this thanking the mind strategy is that the underlying process that occurs is called cognitive diffusion. So it's a fancy made-up term for being able to distance yourself, create some separation from your own cognitive content. And again, a fancy way of saying the thoughts that pop into your mind, whether those thoughts are words or images or memories, whatever cognitive content pops up into your mind, this thanking the mind strategy helps to diffuse from that content. Because what happens when we're fused is that we're feeling like we're hooked in by the thought, and our actions start to become guided by the content of that thought. So when our mind falls into these thinking traps, one thing that we can do to expand our way of thinking, to climb out of this thinking trap, is what I call the advising a friend question. The advising a friend question would be to ask yourself, what encouragement or what piece of advice would I give to someone that I care about if they were in the same situation as I am? So for example, if I'm having the thought that I'm socially awkward and people are going to judge me, I would help my client think about what advice would they give to someone who's struggling with a similar thought. So they might answer, well, I might tell them that just because they're feeling anxious now doesn't mean that they're going to be anxious if they go into the social situation, because our emotions and our mood fluctuates. I might tell them that, so what if they come across as awkward, and so what if people judge them? If they let that stop them from living the life that they want, the consequences are worse than being judged as being awkward. So that helps people to gain cognitive flexibility. I feel like my strength is in helping clients to discover themselves and to build the identity that they want.